anybody? Did you see another living fucking soul? A flag-saluting motherfucker. Maybe you should let him chop it for a while, huh?
Why did Tony Soprano panic like never before in Season 2, but barely flinch when facing the same or worse prison time in the finale? The truth behind his shocking calm isn't what you think, and it exposes the harsh reality of living a life full of violence and betrayal. Most fans totally miss this deeper meaning. Welcome to Sopranos Breakdown. I'm Matthew, and joining me today is Matthew. Together, we'll break down the world of Tony, Carmela, and the rest of the crew, uncovering hidden detail and diving into the deeper meanings of every episode. Let's get started. Why was Tony less panicky when faced with a long prison sentence in the finale compared to the second season? When that informant spotted Tony and caused him to face a possible indictment early on, he spent the entire episode paranoid, angry, and drinking his sorrows away. In the finale, when Mink tells him he's going to be indicted on RICO charges, which carry just as long a prison sentence, Tony's only outburst is with the ketchup bottle. After that, he seems pretty indifferent about it. Did he just not give a shit at that point? He may have figured he'd done his job as a father. And at that point, many people develop a different outlook on life, like a salmon that has made it all the way upstream and reached the end of its journey, questioning the point of continuing. The only thing keeping him somewhat together at the end is his kids. The line, "Our children are our greatest achievements," resonates deeply here, although Tony's children are a mixed bag in terms of success and hope. Comparing the two situations Tony faced, in Season 2, the prospect of indictment was new and destabilizing. He had much more to lose and hadn't yet come to terms with the life he had chosen. Being shot by Junior represented a last chance to escape the violent, dangerous path he was on. By the end of the series, however, Tony was older, more worn out, and desensitized by years of stress, violence, and loss. His children were grown. Many people he trusted were dead, incarcerated or broken. The life he built was crumbling. Moreover, the nature of the legal threat was different. A first-degree murder charge with an eyewitness sounds more straightforward and terrifying, with a swift trial and no chance of bail. The RICO case, while severe, was more drawn out, relying on the testimony of cooperating witnesses who could be legally challenged, allowing Tony some space for maneuvering, such as house arrest or bail. Tony was fatigued emotionally and psychologically. He had endured a war that decimated his crew, faced betrayal by close allies, and watched his children struggle. His therapist, a key source of insight and support, had dropped him. All signs pointed toward an acceptance of his fate, whether that be prison, death, or continued survival in a decaying world. Tony's resignation can also be seen as a coping mechanism. He knew he had chosen this life and now had to face its consequences. The early panic of facing charges had transformed into a numb acceptance. He had tried to change through therapy, but never truly left behind his violent world. His backup plan, Christopher, was no longer viable, leaving Tony isolated. By the final season, Tony was comfortably numb, as the show often references. He wasn't indifferent out of ignorance or denial. He was indifferent because he had reached the limits of his endurance and no longer fought as hard. He was done with the struggle. Ultimately, the writing style and tone of the series changed by Season 6. The earlier seasons had more plot-driven tension and clearer cause and effect. The final season was more about character deterioration, existential acceptance, and ambiguity. This shift in narrative style means Tony's reactions were less about immediate panic and more about existential fatigue and inevitability. What's the deal with Kevin Finnerty getting Alzheimer's at such a young age? Symbolically, his arc seems to represent the life Tony might have had if he hadn't been raised by mobsters and a seriously messed up mother. But why Alzheimer's? Was it just to set up Junior shooting him and trigger Tony's coma dream? Or is there more to it? It's about Tony losing himself. Alzheimer's is a metaphor for that slow, creeping loss of identity, like how Tony couldn't bring any business to the Finnerty family reunion. Once you lose yourself, you're as good as dead or headed straight to hell. Meadows saves him in that moment, acting like his guardian angel. Without her, Tony would have been lost. That's why in the iconic Holston scene, her face is the last thing Tony sees. Pure, cinematic brilliance. Meadows' presence has been a lifeline throughout the show, from keeping Phoebe from shooting Tony in Season 1 to trying to anchor him in the final moments. But in the end, she's just a moment too late. Emma gets there first. If Tony had never woken up, AJ would have been in deep trouble. The kid would have blabbed everything to the cops after trying to kill Junior. Without Tony's protection, AJ would have been left to rot in prison, totally vulnerable. The crew wasn't about to pull strings for him like they did for Tony. Maybe Chris would have tried, but that's about it. AJ's a mess, but jail would have broken him completely. His arc mirrors Ziggy Sobotka's from The Wire, another tragic figure who was bullied, belittled, and ultimately swallowed by the system. Remember when Nicky cleared Ziggy's debts and even got some money back for his car, only for Ziggy to throw a tantrum and waste it? That's Ziggy in a nutshell, ungrateful and self-destructive. Back to AJ. Carmela might have hired Tony's lawyer regardless, and the family crew would have covered for him to keep appearances. Bobby and Chris are blood, and guys like Sal and Paulie have known Tony forever, so no one wants to look like a snake by letting AJ go down. The bigger question is whether AJ's suicide attempt would have succeeded without Tony arriving in time. Probably yes. With Tony gone, AJ's depression would have worsened, and he might have chosen a deadlier method. As for mafia loyalty, don't be fooled. Look at how they treated Jackie Jr. once his father died. Like trash. Tony himself had little patience for Pussy's widow, the mafia's code about taking care of each other's families. Mostly a myth. Paulie and Vito almost screwed Carmela out of a huge payday when they thought Tony was dead. There's no honor among thieves. Kevin Finnerty's Alzheimer's represents more than a plot point. It echoes Junior's decline and Tony's fear of fading away. It's a symbolic piano hanging over Tony's head. Mob life and disease, both countdowns to his doom. Some interpret this through Buddhist concepts. Bardo, samsara, karmic debts. But at its core, it's a man losing himself. David Chase also layers Christian symbolism throughout the show, so it all blends into a dark, spiritual stew. AJ's story is a dark reflection of Tony's. Without Tony, AJ would spiral, potentially falling under Chris's chaotic wing, but more likely he races toward a tragic end. And Tony's coma dream? That was spot on for what a coma experience feels like. Reality bleeding in weird, fragmented ways, mixed with terrifying hallucinations. The brain tries to fill in gaps, creating bizarre, surreal moments that feel frighteningly real. In the end, the Kevin Finnerty Alzheimer's arc is a beautifully bleak metaphor for Tony's loss of identity, a reflection of his family's decay, and just one more layer in the tragic masterpiece that is The Sopranos. So what exactly did Phil do to rack up 20 friggin' years in the slammer? Because if there is one thing Phil never shut up about, it was those 20 years in the can. But seriously, what crime could possibly justify that? Shinebox theft? Compromise grilled cheeses and tissues? Whatever the hell went down there, it must have been something. He was originally sentenced to 6 months for stealing a Shinebox. 6 months. Then somehow he compromised and ended up doing 20 years instead. How does that even work? In my book, you get bonus points for not doing the time, not for agreeing to a sentence that sounds like a life sentence for stealing lunch money. Good thing, your book doesn't mean a damn thing to me. Yeah, that was the energy. Then there's the mystery of Rico. Is he Phil's brother? No, that's Booty. Rico was supposedly a roughneck, maybe even gay. There's talk about racketeering, 27 hits, being the visiting day of the mafia and committing murders in Denmark and Czechoslovakia. But his apartment looked like a dump? Makes sense. Mobsters don't exactly do interior design. Also, fraud. He pretended to be a house, got insurance, then turned back into Phil and claimed the house was stolen. Clever, right? Cha-ching, meanwhile, the Ayatollah didn't like the Shah's Western values. There was the 1979 Iranian Revolution, and somehow Phil's Shinebox theft was real greaseball shit among the Italians. People talk about 20 fucking years, but no one's ever confirmed exactly how much time Phil actually did. It's implied he was mob, but it's all whispers and half-truths. Oh, and don't forget the infamous jack-off into a tissue image. Yeah, that's a thing now, really paints a picture. There's speculation Phil might have been on medication in prison or maybe undercover for the CIA. He could have been a high-up in some desert country, or just a guy who ate grilled cheese sliced so thin it liquefied on a radiator. Because, of course, prison dinner was a big deal, and Phil apparently had a system for prepping cheese like a Michelin star chef behind bars. He once tried to whack Animal Blundetto over a manicotti insult. Tasted like grilled cheese cooked on a radiator, he said. That's old-school mob code for don't mess with my recipes. But really, are we sure Phil even did time? Seems like something that would be made a big deal of, but maybe you have to read between the lines. Then there's talk about him jacking off in tissues, cutting tags off shine boxes, getting caught point shaving in college basketball, or just playing conspiracy to commit murder. His original sentence was 5 years, but he liked the radiator so much he kept committing new offenses to stay longer. Makes sense. Bottom line, Phil compromised. That's what he did. Whether it was for a shine box, racketeering, whacking someone, or just because the RICO laws got tougher, Phil spent some serious time behind bars. Or maybe he didn't. Who knows? The whole thing's a mess. And honestly, that's exactly how it should be. Why didn't Tony S. ever visit Tony B. in prison? It's pretty obvious when you think about it. Tony's always talking about how close they were growing up. Practically brothers, even wearing matching suits the night they got arrested. Yet Tony B ends up doing 17 years, and Tony S can't be bothered to visit once? Not a letter, not a phone call, nothing. Tony claims guilt kept him away, like he was too ashamed to face Tony B behind bars. That sounds more like an excuse. If you really cared, you'd find a way to show up. Instead, it's total silence. So what's the real reason? Was Tony just selfish? Avoiding the prison visit because it reminded him he was supposed to be the one in trouble? Or maybe he was afraid Tony B would resent him and didn't want to deal with that. Whatever the case, it's a huge betrayal that the story barely acknowledges, and it definitely adds another layer to the tension between them later on. The thing is, Tony B's character basically appeared out of nowhere. His whole story feels like a late-season addition with shaky motivations. Tony S.'s guilt over the panic attack that led to Tony B's incarceration could explain why he wanted to forget him. That's probably the most reasonable explanation for why he stayed away. But let's be honest, Tony S. isn't exactly a guy who forms deep emotional bonds. He's mostly shallow, except for a few people like his kids and Gloria. Sitting across from Tony B in prison and confronting that guilt, not his style. And realistically, mob guys just don't visit each other in prison. Richie April? Paulie? No. Visiting someone locked up is like inviting trouble, making yourself a target for law enforcement, or even superstitiously tempting fate. They'd rather pretend it's not happening. Then there's the odd fit of Steve Buscemi's character. Polite, educated, almost out of place among these Jersey gangsters. His arc swings wildly, from trying to stay clean to suddenly beating up made men. It's jarring, like the writers struggle to integrate him smoothly. Still, maybe that was intentional. Even the smart guys who try to go straight often get sucked back into the criminal world's quick money and chaos. Poor impulse control and self-sabotage are part of Tony B's story. Also, the timeline gets messy. Tony B wasn't part of the show until season 5, so naturally, he's off doing his time while Tony S keeps running things, juggling family drama and endless affairs. Bottom line, Tony is a selfish mob boss. He didn't visit because in their world, it just doesn't happen. Out of sight, out of mind. Feelings don't get much airtime when you're busy running a criminal empire. That's the real reason Tony B got ghosted. Why isn't The Second Coming way more famous? Honestly, it might be one of the most devastating, thematically rich hours of TV ever made. Everyone always talks about Funhouse, Pine Barrens, Whitecaps, long-term parking, and Blue Comet as The Sopranos' best episodes. Sure, those are classics, but The Second Coming. It's right there with Ozymandias from Breaking Bad. Except, if you ask me, even more gut-wrenching. There's so much packed in. AJ's crushing depression finally explodes after 6 seasons of build-up. The awkward pool scene. Tony and Carmela's signature fiery argument. A brutal callback to Livia's toxic grip on the family. Melfi's last therapy session before she completely bails on Tony. Meadows' fate sealing itself by turning into a mini Carmela, and Tony's impulsive revenge on Coco that dooms everyone. It's bleak and soul-crushing. Sure, it's not packed with action or a major death, so maybe that's why it doesn't get the love it deserves. But it's hands down one of the most haunting episodes ever. And who can forget Tony finding Coco's tooth in his pant cuff? Classic. It's highly regarded. How about that for symbolism? The tooth stands for the strong Italian-American roots getting ripped apart by the whole American experiment, erasing the last shred of their unique culture from the Gulf of Sorrento. Yada yada yada. Then there's Melfi, turning her back on Tony when he's literally a mess of grief. What she did. Immoral. A terrible thing for a psychiatrist to do. Wonder how she'd feel if Tony died, at least not by suicide. So no crushing guilt. Still, that final therapy scene? One hell of a gut punch. So yeah, it's a great episode. But here's the thing. It's too serious. No usual comic relief, heavy dramatic focus, and a lot of fans just couldn't stand AJ. That alone might explain why it's respected, but never quite loved. Honestly, the focus on AJ is probably the episode's biggest problem. The fanbase during the show's run hated him. Sometimes that's just how it goes. Forget about Coco and his dumb tooth. If Phil was in Tony's shoes, Coco would have been dead, made man or not. And yes, those Johnny cakes? Addictive. But you want me to keep going while choking on this midday snack? The Sacred and the Propane. A modern epic. Forget AJ's arc. You gotta wait for that payoff. Because things fall apart. The center doesn't hold. And that wasn't a hit. It was just stupid. Drop your thoughts in the comments section below. Do you agree or disagree? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more updates. Your opinions matter, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.